I see this a lot in service businesses when they come to work with us and, we'll crack into the back end of their business, take a look at their project management. And oftentimes the symptoms that they come to us with, they're like, well, our, 3-month projects become 6-month projects. And I'm like, oof. So we're losing money, right? Our goodwill with our clients, our trust is being broken, right? And those people, especially if we're in like a retained service model, people aren't sticking with us, right? Because they're like, well, you said this was going to be done in 3 months, that's done in 6. And it could be, a mutual fault, right? Where, folks aren't getting things on time, but it starts to become like a really lengthy process to get things done inside of the business. Also, things become super inconsistent. I find that oftentimes when teams grow to usually like around 30.
Welcome to the Business Ownership Podcast, brought to you by Awareness Strategies, helping you navigate the waters between entrepreneurship and ownership. Hey there, peeps. This is Michelle Nedlek, and I'm super glad that you're here with us today because I'm here with my most amazing guest, Alyson. Alyson, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Michelle, it's such a pleasure. I'm excited to be on.
Awesome. So give everybody the highlight of who you are and what you do for business.
Yeah, totally. I'm Alyson Caffrey. I'm a small business operations strategist. We basically help organize all the stuff behind the scenes that makes the business run a little bit smoother, brings some more peace to the day to day, and a lot more efficiency and clarity to growing teams. I've had operations agency, my company, for the last 7 years. For real, cannot believe it's been that long. And I've always been kind of everybody's best kept secret behind the scenes. We, come in and support founders who are really great at what they do, and they kind of get stuck in running a business because they find a lot of success. And so we help them navigate some of the changes and the seasons of growth of their company. I'm also a mom to 2 little boys, 3 and under. So my house is wonderfully chaotic, like absolutely wonderful. I love the high energy of our life right now and how strict we all are with our time. So I talk quite a bit about the wonderful forcing function of motherhood, and just recently launched a brand over 2 years supporting moms one-on-one through the season of maternity leave in their business, because we don't like get maternity leaves, right? It's kind of something that we have to create. So I like to say I have a lot of irons in the fire right now, and I'm totally matching the chaos that is my home and just loving every second of it.
I love it. Well, I think you would have to be an organizer to be able to organize 2 boys and a husband and a business and
Lots of things
everybody's
going
on
on over here.
schedules. Everybody gets little gold stars when things go right. I can
Yeah.
just imagine. So
Yeah.
how did you get into organizing as your thing?
I started out as, one does out of college, and I was like, what on earth am I going to do? I had an English degree and pretty much no plan for anything. And my husband, we dated through college, and he joined the military just after. I was super supportive. I remember being like, this is just the next thing that we're going to do with our life. And so that brought us to Colorado. And I was like, what am I doing? How am I going to get employed? Like, what's the next step for me? As most college kids feel like all those pressures, right? From right when they're done. And I got a job as an executive assistant, and I had no idea at the time. I'd never been in the startup world or small business entrepreneurial ventures. I'd always, both my parents were in corporate, and they were like, get a job in corporate, do something safe, have the 401k, have the whole thing. And so I got really exposed really early to the beauty of small business and a lot of the downfalls. So as an executive assistant, I quickly became the project manager and the one who was running all the events and really managing the sales teams and doing all the hiring and all of the performance reviews. And then I quickly became, as the company grew, the operations manager for that organization, as we literally created from zero in revenue to multiple, 7 figures in revenue. And I remember when I told my boss at the time that I was going to leave, my husband was being moved from one area of the country to another with the military. And, they kind of volunteer you that you're going, but it was a really cool opportunity for him. So we were very excited. And I told my boss, I was like, hey, I don't know what the next season is for my family, but I'm going to need to, put in my notice, but I'm really excited to support you. And I remember he asked me for a 90-day transition period. And that was my first like real wake up call that business owners really need support behind the scenes. They really need someone to support them and help them get all the systems and processes dialed in and set up some key things. And so that's what I did. Over that 90-day transition period, I kind of gave this guy a new lease on his business. He was like, I thank you so much for what you did. And then within 30 days after I had left, I was actually taking LSAT courses to go to law school, and I signed my first client. And I remember they literally said, I want you to do for me what you did for that guy. And I was like, wow, okay, I guess there's something here. So I always joke that I didn't start my business. I kind of fell into business. I started super duper out of need. And honestly, there were so many years, even in the early days of my business, where I was like, I don't know if I'm going to do this forever, but I'm having fun now. And so that's
Right.
kind of how I got into it. I have a knack for organization. I always have. Folks actually say that I'm like the container store for small business owners. And I just come in and like get all their stuff, their messy Google Drive or how they've been kind of doing things. And I'm like, well, what if there was a better way? And I really do believe that a lot of the success is, and I'm sure perhaps you've even experienced this, Michelle, with either your own business or your own life. You're so deep in the weeds of what you're doing, but oftentimes, the simplest answers or solutions you may even be thinking about in the back of your brain, but it doesn't actually become a solution until somebody who has a third party vantage point can just come in and be like, do you really need this sweater you haven't worn in 3 years, or can we throw it away?
Right. Well, especially when it comes to partnerships, because I know with our company, I run the creative side, Brad runs the tech side, and he will file things in a very tech way if there hasn't been a system set up already for
Mhm.
that thing. All of a sudden, it's like, okay, so where did you save that? And it's like, oh, over here. And I'm like, and why did you save it over there? Like, what was the
It makes
rationale?
total sense
Just so
in
I
his
can
brain,
kind of
right?
understand how your brain works and then maybe find it next time. And it's like, no, this is so
Totally.
not happening. Right. So everything's kind of in product and then it's in marketing and then and I'm like, no, marketing needs marketing. It's like,
Exactly.
they're their own division. We need to file it. They're not going to go sifting through all your tech files to go and find the logo. So I can well imagine. Well, and I can't imagine the breadth and width of what you did for this guy, because I mean, there's organization and then there's project management, and all of which that you mentioned needs organization within it. And I can well imagine that most entrepreneurs don't recognize any of that.
Not until they have somebody leave, right? So a lot of the folks who even came to me over the years in operations agency, they were like, well, my project manager is leaving or my assistant's leaving, and out is going all of their knowledge of how to support me, how to support the company. So I don't want to say that I am the exception, because I know a lot of contributors in small companies that do give longer transition periods, especially if they're really integrated into the work that's being done. However, there are some that leave without notice. A current example, I have a client right now, an account manager who's been with them for years, suddenly was like, this isn't for me anymore. I'm burning the candle at both ends. I can't do this, and just totally cut them off cold turkey. And I'm not saying that that wasn't the best decision for that woman. It might have been. However, it leaves the business in a really compromising position. And so I realized that over the years, especially as I'd grown that company, we worked together for about 2.5 years. And then when I went off on my own, I was like noticing a lot of people were coming to me after someone had left, or even when someone new comes in and they're like, I can't train this person. I don't have 50 hours in a day to like give them all my stuff. So I started saying, well, if we just instead of kept all the industry knowledge or the way that the company runs up in our brains, if we centralize it, put it down in a place where everybody understands the rules of engagement, everybody understands how to access it, things like people leaving, people incoming, people going on vacation. I mean, how many times have you known a small business owner to like answer all their emails and stay up on their projects while they're in a hotel? How many times? I mean, probably countless, right? And so now we can start to consider that like people can go in and out of the business. It doesn't really depend on any one person. We can actually, dare I say, have a personal life and, start to take some of that time off. And it becomes really freeing when you start to, imagine. One of my clients says we don't like the hit by a bus analogy. She likes the win the lottery and move to Ibiza analogy. So I've actually adopted that one too,
I like that
because
one
I
much
really
better too.
like it. Yeah, me too.
That's awesome. Well, I remember back in at what feels like an entire era ago, I worked for one particular company whereby the my superior, we always had to have meetings with him because he always kept all the information in his head. And it drove me
Mm,
nuts. And I'm like, okay, dude, I can do some of this stuff for you, but you have to let me know what's going on in your head, because you're keeping everything in your head. You would be way better to just spend like Friday afternoons getting it all down on paper or in a video or in anything and
mm.
then get somebody else to go and organize it for you, because like this isn't working. We can't play this way. Well, we played that way for about 2 years. And then to your point, when they fired me because they thought I wasn't doing my job. And I'm like, dude, I'm doing 6 jobs. That's only one of them. If you hire somebody to do that job, that'd be awesome. And I still have 5 more. So when they fired me, unbeknownst to them that I was doing the work of 5 people, that they lost everything. And they're like, I came to pick up my last check. They're like, do you know anything about this account? I'm like, yeah, I know everything about that account. There would be a problem. Did you delete my email like a good little company should when you fire somebody? And they went, yep. And I went, you just lost everything because it is all organized in sites and files and jobs. And that was my filing system. So yeah, that alone, I'm sure if we talked, I could give you enough stories forever. But talk to me about kind of when people don't get what they're missing out on because of that person. Like, I get it when you get fired and all of a sudden all that knowledge is like, but sometimes you fire somebody and you're like, whatever, they weren't doing their job anyways. That's why we fired them. But what are some of the things that are kind of paramount to those companies that they're missing out on by not having some sort of consistency and in garnering information from people and making sure that it's somewhere accessible to other people?
Yeah, definitely. I see this a lot in service businesses when they come to work with us, and we'll crack into the back end of their business, take a look at their project management, and oftentimes the symptoms that they come to us with, they're like, well, our 3-month projects become 6-month projects, and I'm like, oof. So we're losing money, right? Our goodwill with our clients, our trust is being broken, right? And those people, if especially if we're in like a retained service model, people aren't sticking with us, right? Because they're like, well, you said this was going to be done in 3 months, that's done in 6. And it could be, a mutual fault, right? Where, folks aren't getting things on time, but it starts to become like a really lengthy process to get things done inside of the business. Also, things become super inconsistent. I find that oftentimes when teams grow to usually like around 30, there's usually the need for systems, and then departments like silo them off and they have their own filing system, like you said, with you and your partner. It starts to extrapolate over lots of people, and it becomes really challenging to detangle if we don't like define the bumper lanes early on and really consider, okay, what does it mean to digitally file something here, right? Something so simple, right? How do we label things? Do we use consistent verbiage? I often find that some of the work that we do early on with companies is even just creating a standard glossary for how we refer to things inside of the company. And then there's a shared vernacular. It helps with cross training, right? So if you've got a sales that dreaded sales to fulfillment handoff, right? Like that's like the most cumbersome and specifically threatening thing oftentimes when I work with a small company. But then if everybody's speaking the same language, if we're all looking at the same information, there creates this consistency and really camaraderie inside of the business. I think when we take a look at, performance reviews, for example, I often ask myself the question, did I give this person every single thing that they needed possibly to be able to succeed? And if I can confidently say yes, then I have a people problem, right? But if I can't confidently say yes, then I know that I probably have a systems or a clarity or a leadership problem, because then I need to ask and really just define, okay, what does success look like for this person? What resources do they have? How am I making myself available to be able to impart knowledge and encouragement and excitement about what we're doing? And I think that part is missed. A lot of people want to, especially as the business owner, we want to lead, we want to be the visionary, right? But we can't be the visionary if we're tied down to a lot of the results inside of the business. Sometimes I think step on our own toes a little bit, right? We go to delegate something, we want someone to be successful, and then we end up jumping in and solving all their problems. And so what that does is it tells that person, I don't trust you. I'm just going to do this. And it also shows them that every time they get into a pickle, you're going to come in and solve their problem. So it doesn't breed that creative problem solving, critical thinking, all of those things that we really want inside of our teammates. So there's always a delicate balance between defining these bumper lanes, building the systems, giving them everything they need to succeed, and then just letting people fail or letting people do 80% of the thing that you ask them to do, and then create a process internally just to get a little bit better over time. I think one of the things I've been learning over the years of running a company is that patience is probably one of the biggest attributes that I can get better at, because truthfully, I'm not a naturally patient person, but it's helped so much in working with folks because nobody's in my brain. Nobody knows what I want and what I think. And so the best I can define that for people has always been the key to successful relationships, especially with team.
So what are some of the ways that you've seen systems change over time? Because I know once upon a time I used to teach retail, and it was like, okay, here's how you use the point of sale service. And it's like this 4-inch binder full of documents that nobody ever read. How do you, what changes have you noticed, and why kind of, are they getting more engaged with it and all that kind of fun stuff?
I think systems are always changing. And the thing that isn't is that we all, if we want to leave a lasting legacy and truly build a business that can thrive without us, if this is a season of business owners, like turn the volume up a little bit. We have to master the art of knowledge transfer. And so what that means is the business, every single thing that exists, everything that's done in the business, it cannot live in our brain, absolutely cannot. And that is system independent. So in the oldest times of knowledge transfer, you'd pick one mentee and you'd apprentice them, or they would apprentice you throughout your, elderly life of being a blacksmith or being a woodworker or whatever, right? That was your legacy. It was that one person who was then going to go choose another person toward the end of their career, and then you leave. That's how you leave your legacy, right? Thankfully, we found better ways to do this. And over time, right, it used to be that you'd write all of it down, right? So that was the first thing. People would keep diaries and they'd be in a position to be like, this is the best way I know how to do this thing. And then they'd hand their collection of works or whatever. And then the printing press was invented. And suddenly, instead of just one person having all that stuff, then like a whole bunch of people had that stuff. And now we have Loom, we have Zoom, we have all different types of ways to record ourselves doing things. And that is, in my opinion, the 10.0 version of keeping a diary and logging in all of your most important stuff. So my opinion is that the systems will come and go, the ways, right, in which to give knowledge to people. It's really the habit of building, really key ways that you're documenting what you're doing. You're putting out today's best work. You're like, this is my position on this thing, or here's what I've learned about this. And I think folks lose that in the systems. I know so many business owners who buy a project management tool or buy a, documentation software or a knowledge based software, and then they don't do anything with it. They think that the system is the issue or that it's going to solve the problem, right? The new shiny object, proverbially. And the issue is that they haven't developed that habit internally yet. So, of course, the newest systems have brought us closer together. We have more access to each other and more access to things that can write processes faster, that can document our life a little bit simpler. And at the end of the day, it all comes down to you developing the habit and then letting your team see that that is a priority, right? So that they can develop the habit. My opinion on systems, processes, and just operations in general is that it's kind of like a fraction of everybody's job instead of just one person's job. Right? It's the same way with the culture, right? You can't build a team culture and it's one person's job to keep the culture up. It's everybody's job. It's everyone's job. And so I think it's fun and funny to listen to folks who are like, I'm not a systems person, or I don't do documentation, or I'm really, really struggle with that. I get it. There are tools to support you, but it's still 10% of your job.
Well, and you make so many good points. Like it kind of cracks me up. So what are some of the ways, like I know for us, it was a big thing to make sure that in team meetings, it was like, did you look at this? Did you go back to this?
Mm,
And it's like, this is how we do it. And this is how we, write out in project management software, just the name of what it is you're doing. Cause so many
yep.
times, like the difference between tech and creative, tech goes, it's a 3864, and creative goes, and then it was when Mary took the dog out to the storm, and then we went, okay, guys.
Yeah, the narrative versus the number. That's funny.
Right? I'm sure you've seen that. What were
Totally.
some of the, without outing anyone, and if you do it in a fun way, what was the most kind of disastrous thing you saw and you're like, oh, this is so not going to work?
Oh yeah, totally. So the vagueness in name is like astronomical. I was auditing a company's documentation just yesterday, and the process that they sent me was just called client overview. And I was like, if someone was searching for this on Google, they would not type this. It'd be like, who are our active list of clients, or who are we currently working with, right? Like those types of things. So I even help them think about naming in a way that like all of us naturally search. And I work with digital marketing agencies a lot. And I'm like, let's use your keywords, like use them in your knowledge base, right? We always joke that we build little Googles for businesses. That's what we do all day long. So even the numbers, like nobody would jump in. Like I don't know how many times actually Fun fact, yesterday, legitimately, our charger for our little Shark hand vacuum broke, and I had to go look up the model number, and I, like, looked at it, and then I, like, typed it into Google and Sharks. That was, like, the only time in the last couple of years that I have literally searched a number. However, often I do not search numbers, right? You're not doing that. And so I understand coding projects, especially if you're, like, pulling, data reports or if you're pulling time cards, that kind of stuff, like, that can definitely get implemented behind the scenes. But projects generally, and definitely information, right? Resources inside of your knowledge base absolutely need to be titled what you would search naturally inside of Google. Um, and then additionally, so I'll kind of zoom out too for a second. So we typically find that operations in a small business, and I'm totally pre EOS. Like, I love EOS, it's excellent, but I've really not seen it work well for teams of under 50. It just doesn't happen because it's really cumbersome to implement. It has all of the things figured out. Like, they have an opinion about everything operations wise, which I admire. I do. It was very thorough. And scaling up, same way. Really, really great model. Again, teams like 50 to 70 do really, really great with that. But I find that operations, systems, processes, and clear roles for people are very, very necessary as soon as the team hits about five. And that's contractors, part-time contributors, whomever. As soon as you're, like, really leaning on that way, because communication becomes more complicated, you're usually able to grow in revenue and complexity and all of that stuff. And so what I typically find is that breaking it down super simply and just implementing some simple operation structure is really the name of the game. So it's process, so how you do what you do, when you do what you do, and why you do what you do. It's your people, so who is doing what at what time, and what manual efforts really exist inside of the business is kind of what the people are, right? Why do they exist and what are the expectations? And then the third is the systems, right? So what are we using to manage all of this stuff? And I think, and pull the most accurate data, right? Are our processes working well? Are our people doing their part? And does the system give us what we need? And so if those three, kind of like a three-circle Venn diagram, are overlapping properly, we have a knowledge base that can train our people on our process. We have a project management system, right? That is built out really well that our people can access, that helps them stay on top of their tasks and their manual efforts. And then the third thing is it creates visible data, right? So we can extract some of those ways that the company is operating, those key performance indicators, not our P&L or our cash flow statement or past things, right? Things that happened 15 days ago that were like, whoops, okay, that's not the best ever. I'm talking like real time data that we're like, okay, I did this today, I'm going to do this tomorrow, right? And so that's when operations starts to feel healthy. And that's when we can kind of all come up for air and be like, okay, the business feels a little bit more predictable right now. People know what they're doing. Our data is presenting itself. We can make decisions confidently day to day. And that's all we really need, right? For our small teams. We just need to know what people are doing, when they need to do it, and what to do tomorrow, like at the baseline.
I love it because I've seen it so many times with entrepreneurs that have, like, maybe they have somebody doing their social media and they have somebody else doing their email campaign and they have somebody else that's, helping them at a live event or something like that. And they don't think of them as five people on the team. They think them
Mhm.
as five different meetings that I have to have where I have to translate what happened over there to what happened over here. And it's like, okay, dude, we need to know what they're doing. So
Totally.
we need to have a meeting with everyone so that we can have a half-hour meeting and, save you up 2 hours of having all these redundant meetings. But I've also noticed it in the multi-million dollar businesses where they have divisions. And it's like, okay, well, legal's not talking, kind of doesn't have the same data on this client that accounting has, which has a different set of data from, the contract writer. It's like,
Mhm.
you kind of have to be on the same page, because if you're not, right, you're giving data to somebody that hasn't paid for it, or they're moving ahead on a project and it was stalemated 3 months ago, and so many problems. So quick as a rabbit, can you give us kind of just some of the symptoms that people might be experiencing in their business right now that they don't realize it's a systems problem, but they're going through it?
Yeah. If you can't take time off, from your business, if that gives you a ton of anxiety, that's for sure symptom number one. Symptom number two is if you're burning the candle at both ends in the middle, meaning you're staying up till 2 o'clock in the morning, you're getting up super early, you're ignoring some of those physical and mental health things like getting outside, getting enough sleep, getting a good workout in, or going for a nice walk, like doing things that actually fill you up as a person. So those are the big two for me. Third is that generally your day to day feels unstructured and hectic, and you're doing that proverbial like putting out the fires. I always say that if we're slaves to our email, then we're on somebody else's schedule. So if you feel like you're kind of in your email inbox all day and you're responding to things or technically reacting to things that really just are kind of having a hold over you. The other thing I really love to do is at the end of the week, like, are you generally feeling great or are you generally feeling behind? I often find that if every single week you're like, I feel like I can't dig myself out of this hole. And like every single week I have the great intention of, doing these things in my business, but I never end up getting to them. That might mean that you're kind of living in that cycle. If you're having feast or famine months, so you're focused on sales as the entrepreneur and you're closing new business and you're, driving product revenue, and then maybe you deviate your attention to like product development or you deviate your attention to delivering on your service, and then revenue suffers because you're not in sales. And so I find that that feast or famine is super super common. um, so those are just some things that are high level that you can really take a look at. I say to my clients all the time, like if you don't know generally, what's going on in your projects, if you're that founder that jumps into the Slack and is like, "Where's this? Where's that? Where's the other thing?" If you don't have one place to check on the health of projects, we don't wake up one morning and it happens. And so I think it's really, really important to start to make some of those deposits and start to build the habit around working on your company, right? Because ultimately it is hopefully going to be an asset that can run without you, but we need to make it that. It just doesn't happen overnight. We can't kind of wait for the season when we're not busy, because I've, worked directly with companies, 8, 9 figures in revenue, that have waited to do a lot of this stuff, and everything feels really chaotic. They've waited until the conditions were perfect, waited until maybe one season when they weren't busy or a quarter that had lighter, initiative pull. And I was like, guys, I mean, this has fallen to the back of the queue now for years. You know, it's hard. And, I think sometimes, especially if we're being honest, right? As founders, as entrepreneurs, business owners, leaders, whatever stage of business you are in, you're still a person with limits, a person with needs, a person who needs to really separate themselves from all of the requirements of the business. And so that business, if you're any good at what you do, is going to have a multiplying effect that you for sure cannot keep up with, and has nothing to do with how great you are at what you do. It really doesn't, right? As you start to gain new traction, notoriety, product sales, service sales, and you start to hire contractors, then eventually full-time employees or whatever that looks like, the business starts to take on a life of its own. And you, as the number one bottleneck, can't possibly sustain all that stuff. And so getting some support, defining it early, figuring out how you can best work with your team and keep track of all the things that need to happen inside of the business. It's way easier to do early on, in my opinion and my experience. So that's something I think it separates a lot of business owners from each other, right? You've got like the frazzled, like I'm barely hanging on type of business owners. And then you've got the ones who it's still tough, right? It's never going to be not challenging. You're never going to need to or you're never going to be able to just completely put things on autopilot proverbially, right? But it's going to be a lot simpler, a lot more peaceful, a lot more predictable.
Nice. So we've got everybody terrified because they're all going, "Oh my God, that's right." But I'm going to ask Alyson about a Cinderella story of one of our clients. So don't worry, it gets better. But before we do that, we're going to take a quick break.
Are you running a business over 7 figures but still struggling with technology headaches? Pay attention, you do not want to miss this offer. This podcast episode is brought to you by Awareness Strategies, who is offering a custom-built digital adoption roadmap for anyone running a business over 7 figures who's wanting to grow their business in the next 5 years. And it's not just a roadmap, they offer full implementation as well if that scares the out of you. Check out awarenessstrategies.com/roadmap for more details today. The link's in the show's notes. Don't regret not doing this. Do it now. That's awarenessstrategies.com/roadmap.
So I am super excited to hear about a Cinderella story of one of your clients.
Yeah, totally. So I actually worked with this gentleman a few months ago, and he came to me because his wife got this fantastic opportunity in London to further her career and get her master's. And she gets accepted to this wonderful program. And he calls me and he's like, I'm petrified. I don't know what I'm going to do, how I'm going to run my company from London. He was here on the East Coast. And he was like, can we just work together to make sure that my company is firing on all cylinders? He was running an SEO agency. So I pop the hood and we start working together. And I'm like, let's see like where the source of all of this, honestly, like tethering is, right? Like he just feels like so changed to his company. It's like, I can't even imagine being in London, being able to enjoy it, support my wife. And like, I really want to support my wife. So I was like, cool, let's do this. So I get behind the scenes of his company. I take a look at his utilization rate, which is a really, really critical metric inside of a digital marketing agency. It basically shows us how utilized your team is of your billable hour. So if he's charging $150 an hour, we want to make sure that most of his team's time is going toward actual client work and not other stuff, right? Meetings, admin, Slack. So we get in, we take a look, and he's 30% overutilized on his services, which means his team is working double time, but they're not billing that to the client. And I was like, oof, okay. It was a tough one because he was having a lot of these questions. He was like, why? Like I run the numbers and I'm like, we should be profitable. We should be, in a good way. My team members' costs are not super high. And he was just so confused. He was like, what is going on? So I was like, let me get into this. So I took a look at his service stack. I saw what he was offering. I saw what his people were making. And I told him, I was like, listen, if we can train them to do this 30% faster. Suddenly, we're in a position of break even. I said, and we need to implement some better time tracking mechanism for your team to actually accurately bill the client. And so he was like, I'm actually really scared. He's like, I can't go back to my clients and tell them that I need 30% more from these months. I was like, let's take these as a wash. I was like, and then let's create some packages. I said, operationally speaking, it's really, really important, especially in a sales conversation. And this is for almost every client I've ever worked with, where if we have some really clear cut packages that are appropriately priced, because a lot of service providers I work with are actually underpricing for their services. And I'm not a finance expert. I'm not someone who works directly on profitability. I have a lot of partners who really specialize heavily in that. But operationally speaking, right, we can't expect our team to be doing the things they need to do in an amount of time if we haven't actually appropriately priced the project, timed it out. So it actually ends up providing a lot of headache behind the scenes. So we created 2 new packages. He ended up upgrading a lot of his clients to his higher ticket package because we priced it value based. We still ended up tracking time more appropriately. And now he was in a position where he was only spending 40% of his total revenue on delivering on services. So we went from a 30% overutilization to a 60% gross profit margin on his services. And he was so happy. He's currently in London with his wife supporting her. And not only is his current business that he runs, his SEO agency, way more profitable than it ever was, he's pretty much fully out of it. And he's actually starting another company, something he's super passionate about. So this didn't just save a small business from like trending very slowly toward a painful death. But it also gave a guy his life back and the ability to support his partner. Like, this is the power of being able to have a business that actually is predictable and actually model like sound, like you have a good model. Is it's just so empowering for the founder and its, contributors, right? The business manager of this business has a healthier work-life balance too. She's perked up and is way happier about managing a team who understands what they're doing and a happy, profit, healthy company. So it really does change so much about a company, just being able to focus on some of the stuff.
Well, I know if nothing else, every marketing company out there is like, yes, we need to get a hold of you. So I know our listeners are going to want more from you. How did they start that journey with you?
Yeah, sure. My company operations agency, we have a ton of amazing resources. I am most active on Instagram. So if you want to send me a direct message with the number one thing that you're struggling with, in your business right now at operations agency, I have so many resources. I run live workshops every single week for our community, and we're constantly creating templates and things that folks can leverage to get some operational wins right now. So I'll send you my best stuff. Just connect with me. I'm also in there all the time. I love hearing people's ops questions. And the reason I firmly believe that I've done all of this work and that I've lasted for the 7 years is because, first of all, I'm excited about this stuff. It's really, really awesome when I get to see wins like I just shared with my client. And I know so many business owners that are like, what is operations? What do I even do? I don't understand how to do this. And my actual passion and job is to just make this so simple. Like, make it simple, make it really easy to understand. And you don't have to really subscribe to all the things other people are doing. You don't have to do any of that stuff. We need to just do what's great for you and define that in a way that we can show others how to do it. And that's the beauty of entrepreneurship.
I love it. Just go on to Instagram and just go hashtag help. I'm in business. Pretty much sums it up. I'm kidding. We will, of course, have all of Alyson's links in the show notes. Go ahead and scroll down, click on links, but open them up in a new browser because we're not done yet. So, Alyson, I get to ask you, at what point in life did you know you're especially kind of crazy enough to think that you could become an entrepreneur?
Ah, man, I think it's forever. It's always evolving. So something that happened the other day, my husband and I, this is actually the first time I think I'm saying this in a public arena, but we've decided to sell our house and move. And we just moved here 2.5 years ago. So proverbially, we're like just getting settled. Like, I don't even think most of our boxes and things have actually fully been unpacked. We went through a major renovation. Like, I'm talking knock the walls, pull the cabinets, pull all the floors, like major, major renovation. And my husband and I looked at each other the other day and we were like, I don't think we're comfortable being comfortable. I don't think that's who we are. And so we've like reconciled with that. And I think that's what makes me quote unquote like crazy enough to be an entrepreneur, is that I'm actually most comfortable uncomfortable, solving people's problems, like getting my hands dirty. I almost feel I don't want to say anxious, but like just a little off whenever everything's kind of okay. I feel like if everything's going perfectly, I got to like break a glass in my kitchen or something, right? Like something needs to be happening. And so I'm really working through this. So if anybody's listening and we're like, yeah, Allie seems like the capital C kind of crazy. Um, it's really, I think, being comfortable, being uncomfortable, right? It's just that way. Entrepreneurship is always going to be a new challenge, a new thing that's coming down the pike. You're going to have to bat away all the shiny objects and the AI trends of today. And you're going to need to really understand, like, what am I here to do? Whose problems am I here to solve? And how can I best serve them? And then everything else just kind of figures itself out. And like, I have early days, of course, I was like, can I do this? Even now, I'm like, who am I? Like, what does this next level look like? I can't do this. And then I just get a little bit more uncomfortable. And then all of a sudden I look around and I'm like, oh, I'm 7 years into business and I've got an amazing team. And it's just so incredible, I think, how much everything does just kind of end up working out, not the way you thought, but the way that it needs to. And all we need to do is just keep getting uncomfortable, right? Keep pursuing the next level of growth, keep, figuring out better ways to do things, keep serving people from deeper and deeper places of our heart. And I think that's what makes me crazy enough to be a business owner.
Well, welcome to the club. We appreciate you having you here.
Oh, thank you so much. Honestly, I still don't feel like I belong, but here I am standing, so it's good.
You've been absolutely awesome. Any last words for our peeps?
Oh, man. Just keep going. I know so many companies that could have been great, or entrepreneurs who started something and they really had it, but then it was just time or patience or just the willingness to go the next day. And I think a lot of times, especially a lot of what we talked about today, you could be in the thick of it, like really burning the candle at both ends. You could be in a position where you're like, wow, I have actually neglected my personal health, or I have actually just lost a really key team member, and it was because I didn't have some of this stuff in place. Know that it happens to the best of us. And the only most incredible thing that you can do next is just keep going. Just keep being here for it, keep being willing to improve, willing to learn, willing to admit your mistakes. And nobody asked any business owner to be perfect. We just asked you to keep showing up and keep doing better. So I think hopefully that will encourage some of you guys listening, because I mean, I don't know everything. I'll know more tomorrow than I know today. And that is like the greatest thing ever to look forward to.
Alyson, you've been amazing. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it, and I know how valuable it is.
Thank you, Michelle. I had a blast.
Awesome. Peeps, this is Michelle Nedelec. Thank you for being here with us today. Be sure to subscribe to the show, share it with your friends. We love helping entrepreneurs grow.
Are you running a business over 7 figures but still struggling with technology headaches? Pay attention, you do not want to miss this offer. This podcast episode is brought to you by Awareness Strategies, who is offering a custom-built digital adoption roadmap for anyone running a business over 7 figures who's wanting to grow their business in the next 5 years. And it's not just a roadmap, they offer full implementation as well, if that scares the out of you. Check out awarenessstrategies.com/roadmap for more details today. The link's in the show's notes. Don't regret not doing this. Do it now. That's awarenessstrategies.com/roadmap.